KTSA News Time is 10:08. Good morning. It is Good Friday, April 22nd, 2011. Very special Gang of Four this morning. It's an all-mayors edition of Gang of Four. We thought, you know, why stop at one mayor? Let's just have three of them in here today. So we have in the studio with us on the gang today the man who has been mayor of San Antonio since 2009, and before that served 4 years on the city council in District 7, Mayor Julian Castro. Mr. Mayor, good morning to you.
Good morning, and happy Good Friday. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you, and we're glad that you were the you had the original idea of doing this. I think it's one of your best ideas ever. So thanks for suggesting it. And when Mayor Castro suggested this to me, I was kind of dubious as to whether it could be done, and he said, "I'll talk to them." So he talked to these two.
Your producer had to talk
and our producer talked to them too. But paving the way for this today, the mayor had this idea, and we're glad. Also with us today on the gang, Lila Cockrell, who has been mayor of San Antonio in 3 different decades. 1975 to 1981, and again from 1989 to 1991. Mayor Cockrell, it's good to have you here as well.
Oh, well, this is a lot of fun. And
welcome.
So I'm enjoying being on with Mayor Castro and Henry Cisneros, a wonderful mayor, and so it just be very interesting. You know, I always enjoy what the other mayors have to say and looking back on their terms or looking ahead to new terms of how to see our city grow, and so I thank you for inviting me.
Sure. How often do you all see each other? I mean, how often do you see your other, you know, counterparts on city council or other mayors? Do you see them often?
Well,
are there secret meetings?
No secret meetings. No, of course not. No, I see them. I see some of the mayors very frequently. Others, just because their paths don't happen to cross as often, I see less often.
All right.
But you know, the thing I think is great about San Antonio is that, so far as I know, all of the mayors who have served and who are now living mayors really like, appreciate, and respect each other. Mm-hmm. That is not true in every other city. I've known other cities where I've had friends who were mayors, and they would say, "Oh, I can't even go back into City Hall. They don't like me there anymore," or something like that. I just have the greatest respect for the gentlemen who are on with me today, but also others who have served because they love this city. That's the thread that binds all of us. We all just love our city. And when you have that common denominator, it just brings you together, and you just want to help each other and see the city move ahead.
Well, we have Mayor Castro, we have Mayor Cockrell, and we have the man who is really the modern-day standard by which San Antonio mayors are usually judged. And I think we could say that's probably true whether they like the standard or not. Everybody says that, you know, Henry Cisneros is the standard, the mayor of San Antonio throughout the 1980s, and then the Secretary of HUD in the first Clinton administration. And Mayor Cisneros, it's good to have you on Gang of Four.
Jack, thank you, and thanks for your program, which a lot of San Antonians follow, and is the standard itself for information and news. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. Keep going. No, I'm just kidding. All right, one of the most disturbing stories in the news this week is something that anybody and everybody can relate to and have an opinion on. I mean, when this news broke this week, it was just the most shocking thing. A 6-year-old kindergartner in Houston brings a loaded handgun to his elementary school lunchroom, drops it on the floor, the gun goes off, wounding him and 2 of these other little kids. Houston police are still investigating exactly what happened, but it seems likely that this gun came from home and that somehow he brought it to school. Now people are saying that we need metal detectors at every door of every elementary school. You all have been in the public policy arena for a long time. You know that people's first reaction to a story like this is always very emotional. But taking a more sort of step back and think about it approach, is that the right answer? Are metal detectors the right answer here?
I don't necessarily think so. In fact, it was interesting, you know, a couple of nights ago, I was watching part of the news, and it was 12 years now since Columbine
Right.
in Colorado, and of course they also had an incident at a shopping mall about
Right.
1 or 2 miles away from
Yeah.
there. But at that time of Columbine, there was a tremendous amount of discussion about both youth violence and what might be driving our young people to more violence, and also the need to secure our school campuses. And since Columbine, I think that you have seen more school police departments and a greater concern when a principal or assistant principal hears that somebody is making a threat. But I do believe that you have to strike a balance between safety and allowing an educational environment to be kind of free enough so that people can flourish in it. You don't want it to look like a prison.
You don't want a fortress. You don't want kids to be afraid to go to school.
That injures the educational component of the school.
But, Mayor Cisneros, a lot of what happens in schools is really just a symptom of what's going on in the lives of children at home. So rather than just focusing on the school, it seems to me the real question, and this is the question I certainly have as a parent,
Right.
is what's going on in a house where a six-year-old
Right.
can get a gun?
Well, you're right. I mean, that is obviously a mismanagement of the home environment by the parents to allow a gun to be in a place where a child can access it and carry a loaded weapon to school. But it raises a larger question, I think, which is the availability of guns in our society. Now, I know that this is Texas, and there's a lot of folks who believe that everybody has a right to use a gun whenever and however they want. But the result of that is then we do have to create fortresses to protect people, because people ought not be subjected to somebody else's desire to carry a weapon. I don't know about you or your audience, but I think it's ridiculous for Texas to be thinking about allowing loaded weapons on the persons of college students in classrooms, in colleges. I mean, human beings being what they are, emotions rise, and what used to be settled by strong words, or used to be settled by maybe a slap to the face, now ends up with a weapon, because the weapon is available. So a gun is available. And same thing with road rage incidents, people carrying loaded weapons in their cars. I'm just one that thinks there's too much availability, easy availability of handguns, and it's not a stretch. It's not an accident to understand why we have as many incidents as we do, and why then we have to protect other people by setting up metal detectors.
Do you believe, I know the Supreme Court's ruled on it twice recently, but do you happen to believe that the Second Amendment is an individual right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I think it is.
So how would you, if it is an individual right, as worrisome as you find the exercising of that right in certain places, how would you curb it without violating a constitutional
well, I think
right?
they're common sense kind of rules, right? Common sense rules like people do not need to carry, weapons with large magazines and clips that can be reloaded. And I mean, we put our police in jeopardy. The criminals are better armed than the police in many instances because we have so few safeguards on those. That's that. But then also where weapons can be taken. Taking weapons into public settings like college campuses and like schools, I mean, just clearly to me violates a kind of a common sense standard.
Mayor Cockrell, do you see it is part of the culture of Texas that we take that right very seriously. Texans will tell you can have their guns when you pry their dead, cold, hard fingers off the handle. But is it possible to have it be a right and then to say you can't exercise that right when you go here, or you don't have that right when you walk onto the campus of a community college? Can you do that with a right?
Well, that is more of a legal question, and I am not an attorney. So I'm not going to try to answer what would be legal or constitutional. I am going to talk about the whole atmosphere of guns, though. I am so troubled by many things that are happening in the world today, but in our state and in our nation and in our neighbor's nation. I've been very troubled about what's been going on in Mexico, and one of the parts of it is that allegedly all of the weapons are pouring into Mexico in the hands of these drug gangs from the United States. And I think somewhere that we have a great responsibility in some of the deaths, the violence that's going on in Mexico. So I think somewhere that we have to strike a balance. You know, people want the right to defend themselves in case of an intruder coming into their home, that kind of thing. But we also have to think of the good of innocent victims who are being hit or hurt, and strike a balance. And so I think it's just a very troubling part of our society today.
I want to come back to this.
But going back to your question,
yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Can we restrict? We do restrict. We don't allow weapons to be taken on airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, common sense tells us that's not a good idea. And we have evidence that it's not a good idea. So what the society needs to do is figure, where do we draw the lines of what's acceptable and what's not? I think the mayor's right. And it's a balance question, it's a judgment question, and it's a common sense. I mean, it's one of those questions where you know common sense when you see it. You know, carrying a gun into a school or a college classroom, to me, crosses the line of common sense.
We'll come back to the school question, but since Mayor Cockrell brought up Mexico, as a mayor, Mayor Castro, you're not making foreign policy, you're not conducting a foreign policy with Mexico. How much is the border violence, how much is this drug cartel issue on your radar?
It's definitely on the radar now. That aspect of it, the actual violence, is most on the radar of Chief McManus and the police department, as of course they protect us here in the San Antonio community, but they're also being proactive and are working with South Texas law enforcement to form a team that monitors crime that happens on the border that might spill over into the United States, and does what it can to prevent that from creeping up into the San Antonio area.
Maybe I should ask it a different way. I mean, if the perception was that it's getting worse down there, and I'm talking now about the nationwide perception, it's getting worse. Things are out of control. They've lost control of the border. This is the nationwide perception. And then people are looking at San Antonio, and on a national map, we look like we're right on that border. Of course, we know we're not. How much do you have to worry that at some point that perception turns us into a literal border city instead of a virtual one, and starts to affect your vision, your economic vision, or your planning for the long-term future of the city?
Well, you know, there's no question that it's something that we have to be vigilant about. Now we're talking about perception of the city. I agree with you. You know, you talk to many folks in other parts of the United States, and a lot of times they think that we are on the border.
Right.
You know, they think that we're right next to Mexico, and so I have to explain, no, you know, you actually have to drive, 2.5 hours to get down to Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. But I have not seen a negative effect on the perception out there of San Antonio. I think a lot of that has been because San Antonio over the last few years has been in the news for good things, for being very recession resistant, having a good local economy, growing like the rest of Texas. So we've been able to avoid that. Ironically, the turmoil down there in northern Mexico has in some ways benefited San Antonio, because you have a lot of folks of means from the Mexican community, folks who are professionals, folks who are business owners, who have now set up shop in San Antonio and brought that capital and brought their brain power to our city. So I don't see a negative perception right now out there about San Antonio. It is, you're right, it's something that we need to be concerned about. But I do see more investment in the city and the potential for economic development, ironically, because of it.
Mayors Cisneros and Cockrell, do you agree that we're far enough away that we can combat the perception that border crime, that cartel crime is going to be a problem for us?
I think Mayor Castro is precisely right. I have seen zero evidence, and I'm fairly involved in economic development activities, and I see no evidence at all. It's never come up as a subject